Hey guys, Brent Hull here. Wednesday, happy Wednesday. I'm gonna do another design video, trying to fix an 80s, 90s house, try to make it better. I think this one, I did make it better. It was a traditional house though, and so this house knew what it wanted to be and knew what it wanted to look like. And really, I think this house can come to life and really be something special. So just a few tweaks, fixing traditional details really can make a big difference. Come check this one out. Okay guys, a traditional house, trying to be traditional, also trying to be showy. You know, this whole entrance piece right here, obviously that kind of two-story entry in a 1980s, 1990s house. A lot of the problems on this house just have to do with the architectural details and the traditional details that just are kind of messed up. We're gonna look at the dormers, we're gonna look at the roof, the columns, and obviously this entry. Quickly, you know, this is what I did and came up with instead. I could actually almost take the same details that they've got here, fix this roof, because what I've done is instead of having a hip roof, which is what this is, I'm gone with a gable-ended roof, right? So there's my gable end coming across there and going down, right? And so just by pulling this out allows me to spread out these dormers so that they don't get so caught up in the middle here. And then, you know, there's a very grand front porch, but what's the problem with it, right? It's only like 3 feet deep. And so these strong columns are not as strong because you could almost, you know, support that roof with a bracket. So, you know, one of the things I'm doing visually is I'm fixing the proportion of the columns. Remember, there's a relationship like 1 to 7 for a Tuscan or Doric, 1 to 8 maybe, and then the 1 to 10 for the Corinthian. Well, if you do and that's the width to height. And I would say that if we got, you know, one width here, I mean, there's probably, you know, 12 or 15 height there. So that column becomes this really tall, thin column that doesn't have that classical proportion. We're gonna fix this eave detail, or this entablature here, because right now they've got, you know, this kind of interesting, you know, cornice. They don't really have a frieze, and then they've got this dentiled architrave, which is kind of funny. So if we look at, you know, the first thing I did there was I increased the depth of that entablature. And by increasing that entablature by about 6 or 7 inches, it allows me to then decrease that proportion of the column, and these columns become heavier and stronger, right? Instead of 1 to 15, we're taking it down to like a 1 to 12 or something like that, so it doesn't look quite the same. I've dropped it back, so now this, you know, I think a 8-foot porch here would be much more appropriate than the 3 or 4 feet, maybe 5 feet that they've got there. There are so many good examples of entryways that look better than this. It's so wide, right, that they have to spread their columns out. And so now the columns, and there's that whole thing, intercolumnization, that there's a spacing and there's a visibility and a proportion to those openings that looks pleasing and looks appropriate. Now, they've done a good job of opening this up just so that you can see this, but this is so wide, it messes up the columns across here. And so you'll notice that I have brought these columns in, right, so that it's not as wide anymore. It allows the balance of my dormers above to get better. There's so many great examples historically of better entrances, of good-looking historic entrances. I hate when people kind of invent this new style. A double door is not historically appropriate. I've gone back to a single door with side lights, the big fan light. So, you know, a bunch of little things I'm fixing there. Now, I wanted to show you the dormer piece. Now, look what's happening here, okay? There is if you watch my dormer video, there is a relationship between the size of the glass to the overall proportion of that kind of, that face. If you look at it historically, I mean, it's like 80 or 90%. And in this case, it's maybe 50%. So the window becomes really small. Look what also is happening with these panes of glass, okay? They are rectangles laying on their side, okay? And historically or classically, the rectangle is always standing up. So as I go to fix these, I'm going to fix that, not only the face of the glass compared to the dormer, but also the orientation of this glass so it looks more traditional. One of the things that happens with dormers is that the framing crew will say, well, the whatever overhang is on the house, I'm going to put on the dormer, and you end up with these big hats sometimes. This one doesn't have that so much as it has this weird roofing detail that cuts right across the face of the dormer, and I don't know why it's there, unless they couldn't figure out what to do here. And so if you just look at my example here, where I'm going to take their same face size, and I'm just going to, you know, put our little hat over top, and look what size my window's going to be. Okay, now this could be an arch, or this could be whatever, but this is kind of the size that I'm thinking that window glass should be. And if I just did 2 panes there, I've got this vertical look. Even if these became squares, that would be okay. But, you know, now I have, you know, reduced the size of this dormer. I've increased the size of the glass, the proportion of the glass to the dormer face. And, you know, that in my mind already fixes it. If they had an arch, so if they wanted an arch again, you know, we could still do that, still provide their the detail that they're looking for, and then just put window glass in here. And realize too, guys, that when you're framing these up, if I was going to do a section of this right here, here's your studs, and I'm putting the studs, the 2x4 studs, on the side. Okay, they're not gonna sit out like this because my wall gets too big. Because look what happens on the outside. If I put sheeting on this, and then I put a piece of trim right here, my glass, my jamb is basically right here. Okay, so here's my jamb right there. Here's my trim covering my jamb, and that's how I end up with just a single piece of trim going around the outside, coming right up against my window jamb, and then glass happening right here. Okay, do you see that? Because if I put my 2x4 stud like this, then my jamb has to go inside of there. All of a sudden, this piece of trim out here is growing too big and starts to look fat. So, you know, dormers are a big deal. Dormers can really help change the look of it. And so, you know, those little few details right there and fixing your roofing things really could have helped. Now look what's happening with if we break down their cornice, right? So we've got a gutter, and then it goes back, and then they're called modillions, but these are kind of just big teeth, big block teeth, goes down, and then we got more dentals. So we kind of got dentals there and dentals here. And what I'm doing is I'm doing my gutter, right? I'm doing my corona. And then if they want a modillions look like this, okay? Then it looks like they've got a pulvinated frieze, and then my architrave is down here. So that's why this dimension is why I'm dropping this down, so that my, you know, columns can start here, and I can increase the width of them. Notice too what's happening. This is kind of a weird deal, but there's what's called a Scamozzi ionic, okay? And so if you look at the traditional ionic capital, right, that goes across, it is really a one-sided facing thing, in that the side of this thing is the scroll inside here, right? There's a scroll. If I turned around to this side, the edge of the thing looks like this. And so there's my volute, there's this right there, right? I'm looking at it from the side, and there are these, it looks like a scroll in here. Well, so what's happened here is you've got, Scamozzi was the guy who worked under Palladio, but even in ancient Rome, they had different kinds of columns, capitals, and this was a way to figure out the corner of a building, because what would happen is, if this is my corner and my ionic things are out here, what's happening here? Are they going to see the side of this thing? And so what they did was they cut out the ionic column like this, so that that same scroll, that pretty volute, right, that's happening there, could happen on the outside of the building here and here. And so it's called a Scamozzi ionic, to help the eye see the corner. They've got this Scamozzi ionic everywhere. And so it's just a little bit funny. It doesn't work very well. I think the ionic regular is a stronger, better capital, but that's kind of what's happening here. And here's, you know, how I increase my entablature, put it in there with proper architectural details, historic details, gives me a better capital and a better presence, and allows kind of us to have this porch And this look, you know, I've spread out the dormers, increased the depth of the porch, increased the size of the columns, improved that entry, but really left everything else where it was. And I think we have a better detail because of it. What do you guys think? Better, you know, better things, changing that roof from a hipped roof to a gable end roof. I think it made a big difference, allowed those dormers to spread out, fixing the dormers, right? Really small little things. Those columns, the proportion of those columns, hope you learned something there. Be sure to write in comments because I read all those and I try to reply to them all as well. So I'd love to know what you guys think. I'm Brent Hull, thanks for watching.